Elena sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the wall across from her. The sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, cutting pale stripes across the room. It should have felt ordinary, comfortable even, but something about today felt off. Her gaze drifted to the framed photograph on her dresser. Her family, smiling at some vacation she barely remembered. Or maybe she did remember. Something about the way her mother's hand rested on her shoulder, but the memory felt faint, like it belonged to someone else. Her thoughts, as always, wandered to Vivian. Vivian, the perfect daughter, who had somehow slipped into their lives 6 months ago and made herself indispensable in every conceivable way. She cooked dinners that tasted like magic, straightened the living room cushions to an impossible standard, and remembered birthdays that no one else could. The family adored her. Her parents looked at her with the kind of pride Elena had never felt when she tried her best. And that was what made her uneasy. Elena had never met someone who seemed so utterly seamless, so infallibly competent. And yet, something about her presence unsettled her. It was the small things. The way Vivian always answered questions with perfect phrasing, as if she had rehearsed them. The way she laughed a little too precisely, her smile slightly too symmetrical. Elena shook her head and rubbed her temples. She had to stop thinking this way. She had to remind herself that jealousy wasn't rational, and nothing about Vivian should have bothered her, except that it did. "Breakfast is ready," her mother called from downstairs. Elena sighed, slid her feet into slippers, and descended the staircase. Vivian was already there, setting the table with meticulous care. Her hair fell in perfect waves, her blouse ironed without a crease, her smile effortlessly radiant. She looked up, noticed Elena, and gave a slow, warm nod. "Morning," Vivian said, voice smooth and confident. "You slept well?" Elena nodded, though her stomach churned. "Yeah." She paused, trying to articulate her unease, but the words faltered. She didn't trust herself to say anything without sounding paranoid. Their mother bustled in, cheerful and oblivious. "Elena, darling, could you pass the toast?" Vivian's hand hovered over the basket. "I can," she said softly, before pulling it toward herself with a practiced ease. Her mother's gaze lingered on her approvingly, and Elena felt the familiar knot of frustration tighten in her chest. The day passed in its usual rhythms, school, homework, brief interactions with friends, but Elena found herself watching her family through a lens of suspicion. Every glance, every smile, every word seemed loaded with hidden meaning. She caught herself imagining scenarios in which Vivian wasn't just an accomplished student, a talented musician, or a charming conversationalist. What if she was something else entirely? It was during algebra class that the first real sign of anomaly struck. Elena noticed a note on her desk, crumpled, hastily written, but legible. "Don't trust what you see." Her pulse quickened. She looked around the classroom. No one met her gaze. A prank, she assumed, from one of her friends. But the handwriting wasn't familiar. She stuffed the paper into her pocket, heart hammering. Later at lunch, she confronted herself with the thought again. What if this note wasn't a joke? Her best friend, Max, slid into the seat across from her. "You okay? You're twitchier than usual." Elena forced a laugh. "Just tired. Long night." Max didn't press, and Elena felt relief wash over her. She couldn't explain the strange feeling building inside her. It wasn't just Vivian. It was everything. Even her own memories, the way her parents sometimes looked at her, seemed off. That evening, she returned home to find the family gathered in the living room. Vivian was already there, sitting on the sofa as if she owned the space, flipping through a photo album. Elena approached cautiously. "Mom," she said, voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "Where did Vivian? I mean, how did she get so much of this right?" Her mother smiled, a little too kindly. "Elena, she's been with us for 6 months. Of course she remembers things. She's just thoughtful." Elena nodded, but her eyes stayed on Vivian. The girl was laughing softly at a memory that seemed almost fabricated, her hands brushing over the pages as though she had known these moments intimately. It was uncanny. Too perfect. Later that night, Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't shake the feeling that something about Vivian was wrong. Not evil, no, not evil, but too precise, too controlled. It was as if Vivian wasn't just living in their home, she was rehearsing every step of their lives, measuring herself against them, and slowly becoming them. A soft click in the hallway made her sit up. Footsteps? She froze, straining to hear. Vivian's bedroom door creaked open, and a shadow moved past. Elena's stomach dropped. Why was she awake? Why was she moving around at this hour? The next morning, Elena found a single white feather on her pillow. No note, no indication of where it had come from. She picked it up, fingers trembling. The symbol felt deliberate, an omen or a warning. She couldn't tell which. Elena realized she was already obsessed. Every move Vivian made, every smile, every casual gesture, was catalogued in her mind. And yet, deep down, she knew she needed answers. She had to understand why her own home, her own family, felt suddenly unfamiliar. Because the truth was settling like ice in her chest. Vivian wasn't just a guest in their lives. She was a force. And Elena was beginning to suspect that the world she thought she knew wasn't real at all. The next morning, Elena awoke to the faint hum of the heater and the distant chirping of birds outside her window. She lay in bed for a few minutes, replaying the events of the previous day in her mind. The feather, the shadow in the hallway, Vivian's impossibly calm presence in the living room. Every detail seemed deliberate, and every memory felt oddly rehearsed. Dragging herself out of bed, she glanced at the mirror. Her reflection looked tired, the slight dark circles beneath her eyes emphasizing the unease curling in her stomach. She ran her fingers through her hair and tried to push the thoughts aside. She had school to get to, homework to finish, a life that demanded her attention. But the moment she saw Vivian in the kitchen, all rational thoughts seemed to vanish. Vivian was humming a tune Elena didn't recognize, plating pancakes with meticulous precision. She turned toward Elena, smile perfectly poised. "Morning. Did you sleep well?" Elena hesitated. Yeah, fine." Vivian tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to make Elena feel scrutinized. "You seem tense," she said softly. "Is something wrong?" Elena shook her head quickly. "Nothing. Just tired." She grabbed a plate and sat down, her hands trembling slightly. As breakfast continued, Elena noticed small things, tiny inconsistencies in Vivian's stories. She mentioned a weekend trip to the lake, but the lake was one Elena had never visited. She recalled a teacher praising Vivian for a project Elena had also submitted, but that teacher had never spoken to her about it. The details didn't add up. Every little discrepancy sent a ripple of doubt through Elena's mind, like water running over hidden cracks in glass. She tried to ignore it, to chalk it up to fatigue or coincidence. But as the day went on, the feeling only intensified. At school, she saw Vivian in the hallway, though Elena knew she shouldn't have been there. When Elena asked a classmate about her presence, the response was always the same. "Who? Oh, you mean Vivian? Yeah, she's in a different grade. I don't see her here." Elena's stomach dropped. How had she seen her? It had felt real, tangible, undeniable. But every other indication suggested otherwise. She clutched her notebook, trying to ground herself in facts she could trust. By lunch, Elena was nearly trembling. She slipped into a corner of the cafeteria, away from the chatter of students, and opened her backpack. She needed something solid, something real. Her best friend Max slid into the seat opposite her, eyebrows raised. "You look like you just saw a ghost. What's going on?" Elena hesitated. Could she tell him about Vivian? About the inconsistencies, the shadows, the feather? Max was practical, grounded, a realist who hated mysteries. He would laugh at her, dismiss her fears as paranoia. Instead, she shook her head. "Just weird dreams, I guess." Max frowned. "You've been acting strange for weeks. You know you can tell me anything, right?" Elena forced a smile, though it felt brittle. "I know. Thanks." Lunch passed in a blur. Elena found herself noticing other oddities. Classmates giving her odd looks, teachers pausing before responding to her questions, subtle glances exchanged that she couldn't understand. By the time school ended, her head was pounding with the weight of uncertainty. Returning home, she found the house unusually quiet. No laughter, no music, no smell of cooking. She called out, "Mom? Dad?" But only her own voice echoed back. Tentatively, she stepped into the living room. Vivian was there, seated on the sofa, staring at the photo album she had been flipping through yesterday. Elena's chest tightened. The way Vivian's fingers traced the edges of the photos was almost reverent, practiced, deliberate. Her smile was quiet, but it carried that same uncanny precision that made Elena's skin crawl. Vivian looked up. "Elena, you're home early," she said, voice smooth, controlled. "Everything okay?" Elena swallowed hard. "Yeah. I just wanted to talk." Vivian's smile widened ever so slightly. "Of course. About what?" Elena hesitated, struggling to find words that wouldn't sound insane. "About you. About us." Vivian tilted her head, waiting patiently. "Go on. Sometimes you say things, remember things, about the family. Things that don't make sense. How do you know so much?" Elena's voice wavered. "It's like, you're not just here. You're watching." Vivian's calm gaze didn't waver. She leaned back slightly, folding her hands. "Elena, I'm part of this family now. I've been here for months. I know what matters. I care." "Isn't that enough?" Elena felt a flash of frustration. "It's not about caring. It's about I don't know." Her hands clenched into fists. "Something about you isn't right." Vivian's expression remained unreadable. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a smirk touched her lips. "You'll figure it out soon enough," she whispered, almost as if to herself. Elena froze. The words felt deliberate. Not a casual remark. Something in Vivian's tone hinted at knowledge she wasn't meant to have. That night, Elena lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. Each detail gnawed at her. The precise phrasing, the faint smirk, the sense that Vivian had orchestrated the entire day. She realized she was no longer just suspicious. She was obsessed. Every move, every smile, every glance from Vivian was catalogued in her mind. She couldn't trust her own perceptions anymore. The next morning, Elena awoke to another note. This one slipped under her door. "Watch closely. Reality is thinner than it seems." Her pulse raced. Someone was watching her. Someone knew what she was thinking. And the thought that chilled her the most, maybe she had been wrong all along. Maybe the person she had trusted, her own instincts, her own memories, wasn't enough to protect her from the truth. Because Elena was beginning to understand the unthinkable. Vivian wasn't just living in her home. She was shaping it, bending reality, and slowly changing Elena's understanding of herself. And Elena wasn't sure she liked who she was becoming. Elena had spent the entire day replaying Vivian's words in her mind. "You'll figure it out soon enough." The smirk. The precision. The unshakable calm. It gnawed at her, and now it was all she could think about. By the time she returned home from school, the house seemed quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that made her skin prickle. Vivian was in the kitchen, humming softly, as if the world outside their walls didn't exist. Her movements were precise, measured, almost ritualistic. She lifted a frying pan with exacting care, flipping pancakes as though she had done it 1,000 times, though Elena knew she had. Elena's fists clenched at her sides. She had waited too long. She couldn't ignore it anymore. "Vivian," she said, her voice tight, "we need to talk." Vivian turned, her smile perfect, polished. "Of course. What about?" Elena took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in her voice. "About you. About everything. About why things don't add up. About the way you know things. About how you've been lying." Vivian's smile didn't falter. Her eyes, however, sharpened, alert, measuring. "Lying? Elena, what do you mean?" Elena's heart pounded, and she stepped closer, her words spilling out in a rush. "Don't act innocent. You know what I mean. You remember things you shouldn't. You've been manipulating Mom and Dad. You've been pretending to be someone you're not. I can see it, I can feel it, and I..." "Stop." Vivian's voice sliced through the air, startling Elena. The calmness was gone, replaced with something sharp, almost dangerous. She took a deliberate step closer, and Elena felt the heat of tension radiate between them. "You think you're the only one who notices? You think I haven't been watching you, cataloging your every move? You're amusing." Elena's stomach dropped. "Watching me? What are you talking about?" Vivian tilted her head, a faint smirk forming at the corner of her lips. "You're not as observant as you think, Elena. But don't worry, soon you'll understand everything. Her words struck Elena like a physical blow. Not understanding? What did she mean? Elena swallowed hard, but Vivian's gaze pinned her in place. She realized then that this wasn't a casual game of sibling rivalry. Vivian was playing with her, and she didn't even know the rules. I don't know what you mean, Elena stammered, trying to regain control. All I know is that you're not who you say you are. You've been lying to my parents, lying to me, lying about everything. Vivian's smirk widened. Am I lying, or am I just better at fitting in than you are? She paused, letting the words sink in. You're so worried about being real, about being herself, that you forget one simple thing. The world doesn't care if you're real or not. It only cares if you matter. And I matter. Elena felt rage boil inside her, but beneath it was something darker. Fear. The confidence in Vivian's voice, the way she spoke as if she had anticipated every word, made Elena question everything she knew. Who was this girl? How did she know so much? Why did her presence feel like an invasion? I don't care if you think you matter, Elena spat. You're not part of this family. You don't belong here. You're fake. Vivian tilted her head, her eyes glinting. Fake? Interesting choice of words. But tell me, Elena, who's really fake here? You, thinking you're the only one who's real, or me, who's already proved I can live better than you can? Elena's chest tightened. The words were venomous, but there was an edge of truth she couldn't ignore. What if Vivian really was better at being the daughter, the sister, the person everyone loved? What if Elena had been living a life built on assumptions, memories, and lies she didn't even recognize as hers? The argument escalated, voices raised, accusations flying. Their mother appeared in the doorway, alarmed. Girls! What's going on? Vivian straightened immediately, the perfect smile back in place. Nothing. Mother. Elena just misunderstood something I said. Elena turned to her mother, desperation in her eyes. No, Mom. You have to see it. She's been lying. She's been pretending. Everything about her is a lie. Her mother looked from Elena to Vivian, confusion clouding her features. Elena. What are you saying? Vivian leaned forward slightly, voice soft, persuasive. Mom, I don't know why Elena is upset. She's just stressed. Maybe she's overthinking things. The parents exchanged a glance, uncertain, torn between their daughters. Elena felt the familiar pang of frustration and isolation. No one was seeing the truth. No one believed her. Finally, in a quiet moment, Vivian's smirk returned, almost imperceptibly, but it was enough to make Elena's blood run cold. Enjoy your certainty while it lasts, Vivian whispered, almost as if speaking to herself. Elena didn't respond. She didn't know how. Her own convictions felt shaky, unsteady, as if Vivian had cracked something inside her that couldn't be fixed with words alone. That night, Elena lay in bed, mind racing. The confrontation had left her shaken, but it had also ignited something else. Determination. If Vivian was this clever, this precise, if she had been manipulating everyone for months, then Elena had to fight back. She had to understand who Vivian really was, and what part of her own life might not be real. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by fragments of conversations, the echo of Vivian's smirk, the unspoken warnings hidden between her words. In the darkness, Elena realized one thing with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just about exposing Vivian. It was about uncovering the truth of her entire family, and perhaps of herself. Because Vivian had opened a door Elena never wanted to face, and there was no turning back now. The morning sun streamed through the living room windows, painting the walls with a deceptive serenity. Elena could feel it, a tension that thrummed under her skin like a live wire. Today, she thought, was the day she would reveal the truth. She couldn't bear the uncertainty, the creeping feeling that Vivian was always one step ahead. Vivian was in the kitchen, humming lightly, as usual. She didn't look up when Elena entered. That calmness, calculated, precise, made Elena's stomach knot. She held in her hands the evidence she had gathered, scribbled notes, photographs that didn't match stories, digital records showing inconsistencies in Vivian's timeline. Enough, she hoped, to finally open her parents' eyes. Mom. Dad. Elena called, her voice shaking. We need to talk. Now. Her parents appeared, eyebrows raised, sensing the urgency in her tone. Vivian turned as well, her expression perfectly neutral, though a faint glimmer of amusement flickered in her eyes. Elena took a deep breath. "It's about Vivian," she said. Her hands trembled slightly as she held out the first photograph. She's not who she says she is." Vivian's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile. "Oh. And what exactly am I, Elena?" Her voice was light, almost teasing. Her father furrowed his brow. "Elena, what are you talking about?" Elena's voice grew steadier, fueled by adrenaline. "She's been lying to all of us. She's been pretending to be our daughter, our sister. These," she waved the photographs and notes in the air. "These show everything. The time she wasn't where she said she was, the memories she claimed, they're false." Her mother gasped, looking from the evidence to Vivian, disbelief etched across her face. "Vivian, is this true?" Vivian's expression remained calm, almost serene. She stood and walked slowly toward Elena, the room's tension coiling like a spring ready to snap. "True? Or is it simply inconvenient for your little world to accept that someone could be more capable?" Elena's jaw tightened. "Stop talking in riddles. You're not part of this family, and you've been manipulating us for months." Her parents turned toward Vivian, fear and confusion mixing in their eyes. Vivian didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer to Elena, lowering her voice to a whisper meant only for her. "You think you're the only real one, Elena," Vivian murmured, her breath warm against Elena's ear. "But you're not. You're not as real as you think." Elena froze. Her chest tightened. The words hit her like ice. The smirk that played across Vivian's lips sent shivers down her spine. She wanted to scream, to call for help, to demand an explanation, but something inside her recoiled, paralyzed by the certainty that Vivian was right. Not in some malicious way, but in a truth Elena had never considered. What if everything she believed about herself was wrong? Vivian stepped back, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. Her gaze swept across the room, calm and unyielding, as though she were savoring the chaos she had orchestrated. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the front door. "Vivian, wait!" Elena called, but her voice sounded small, almost desperate. Vivian paused at the threshold, glancing over her shoulder. Her eyes glinted with that unsettling mixture of amusement and certainty. "The rest, my dear, is yours to discover." And then she was gone. The door closed behind her, and the house fell into a tense, heavy silence. Elena's parents looked at her, bewildered, fear and disbelief shadowing their features. "Elena, are you sure about this?" her mother whispered. "Vivian, she's always been so perfect. Could you be mistaken?" Elena's throat tightened. "I'm sure. I've watched her. I've tracked her. I know she's not part of this family the way we thought." Her father rubbed his eyes, running a hand over his face. I don't know what to say. How could we have been so blind?" Elena didn't answer. She couldn't. Part of her wanted to collapse, to cry, to scream. But beneath the fear was something else. Determination. Vivian's words, her final whisper, had planted a seed in Elena's mind, a question she could not ignore. Am I really who I think I am? That night, Elena lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but her mind roared. Vivian's departure had not brought relief. It had brought an even deeper sense of unease. Her memories, her family, even her own sense of self now felt fragile, like glass teetering on the edge of breaking. She thought about the note she had found days earlier. "Watch closely. Reality is thinner than it seems." Vivian's whispered words now made sense in a way that chilled her to the bone. Someone, or something, was manipulating the narrative of her life. She had thought Vivian was the intruder, the threat. But maybe Vivian had only revealed what had been hidden all along. Elena sat up, determination replacing fear. She needed answers. She would dig through old photographs, letters, birth records, and whatever hidden truths her parents might have kept. She needed to uncover the mystery of her own existence, because Vivian had shown her that what she believed to be reality might be nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. And she would not rest until she knew the truth. Because the perfect sister was gone, but the questions she left behind were only beginning to take hold. Elena sat at her desk, The room dim except for the soft glow of her desk lamp. Papers were scattered across the surface. Photographs, old report cards, letters she had discovered tucked away in forgotten drawers. Each one seemed to pulse with hidden meaning, a secret she couldn't quite grasp. The house was quiet now that Vivian was gone, but the silence felt heavier, pressing down on her chest. Vivian's last words echoed in her mind. "You're not as real as you think." At first, Elena had tried to push them aside, telling herself it was simply a cruel trick designed to unnerve her. But now, hours of staring at old family photos and records had begun to warp her sense of reality. Some of the dates didn't align. Names she remembered didn't match birth certificates. A photograph of herself at age 7 showed a stranger standing beside her, someone she had never seen in person, yet the resemblance was uncanny. Elena's hands shook as she picked up a small folded envelope she had found in the attic the night before. Inside were letters addressed to her mother from a woman Elena didn't recognize. The tone was affectionate, almost maternal, but the handwriting was unfamiliar. One letter read, "Take care of her as you promised. Remember, she must never know the truth." The truth. The word pulsed in her mind. What truth? She clutched the letter, her breath catching in her throat. If Vivian wasn't real, if everything she had believed about her family's past was a lie, then what about herself? Her thoughts spiraled. Memories she had held onto her entire life. The warmth of her mother's embrace, the sound of her father reading to her at night, the laughter of her childhood, suddenly felt fragile, as if they could shatter with the faintest touch. Could those memories have been constructed? Implanted? She shivered at the thought. Max had tried to comfort her the day before, but even he couldn't understand. She had brushed aside his reassurances, retreating into a private obsession that consumed her every thought. Now, alone in her room, she felt the familiar pang of isolation. No one could see what she saw, feel what she felt. No one could understand the growing suspicion that she herself might be fabricated. Elena's gaze fell on a family photo from a birthday party. She squinted at it, focusing on the details. Something didn't fit. Her own eyes in the picture seemed different, almost unrecognizable. The angle of her body, the curve of her smile. It was wrong. She shook her head violently. "No, it can't be," she whispered. "It's just a photo. I remember this day. I remember it." But the memory didn't feel hers. It was like watching someone else's life through a foggy lens, the edges blurred, the colors muted. Panic rose in her chest. If she couldn't trust her own memories, then what could she trust? Determined to find answers, Elena began pulling every record she could find. Birth certificates, old school records, medical files. Some were ordinary, but others contained anomalies. A middle name she had never known, an incorrect birth date, a doctor's note with handwriting she didn't recognize. Every discovery was a small thread unraveling the tapestry of her identity. As the hours passed, her mind raced with possibilities. Was she adopted? Or something more complicated? Had her parents been keeping secrets all along? Or worse, had Vivian been right? Was she not real in some fundamental way? The questions clawed at her sanity. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to shut out the spinning thoughts, but they refused to stop. Finally, she pulled open a drawer she hadn't explored before. Inside was a small wooden box, locked, with no key in sight. Her heart thudded. The box seemed impossibly deliberate, placed there with intent, as if waiting for her to discover it. She shook it gently. Something rattled inside. Her curiosity overwhelmed her fear. She had to know. The sound of the lock mechanism was silent, but she could almost feel the weight of the secrets contained within. Papers? Photographs? Something worse? She didn't know, and yet she felt compelled to open it. Elena sat on the floor, trying to calm her racing thoughts. This wasn't just about Vivian anymore. This was about her. Every photograph, every letter, every inconsistency pointed to a possibility that terrified her. Her life, her memories, her very self, could be a lie. Hours later, she sank back against her bed, exhausted. Her fingers traced the outline of the box, her mind reeling. She knew one thing with absolute clarity. She could no longer live in ignorance. Whatever truth her family had hidden, whatever deception had been orchestrated, she had to uncover it. The faint moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting thin shadows across the room. Elena stared at the ceiling, her mind a whirlwind of questions with no answers. Vivian's final words haunted her relentlessly. "You're not as real as you think." Was it a warning? A revelation? Or simply a trick designed to destabilize her further? She didn't know. And that was precisely why she couldn't stop. The first step had been taken. Elena was awake now. Fully, painfully, terrifyingly awake. And the deeper the truth went, the more dangerous it became. Somewhere in the silence, she thought she heard a whisper, faint and almost indistinguishable. It could have been the wind, or her imagination, but it sent a shiver down her spine. "Watch closely," it seemed to say. "Reality is thinner than it seems." Elena shivered, clutching the letters to her chest. She didn't know what she would find next. But one thing was certain. She could no longer pretend that everything was as it seemed. Her world had shifted, subtly but irreversibly. And the deeper the cracks, the closer she was to discovering the truth. The attic smelled of dust and aged wood, a scent that reminded Elena of childhood afternoons she couldn't quite place. She had forced herself up here after dinner, flashlight in hand, determined to search the corners of the house that had always seemed mundane but now felt ominously significant. If Vivian had been lying, if her family had secrets, there had to be traces left behind somewhere. Documents, photographs, letters, anything that could illuminate the truth. Elena knelt on the floorboards, sifting through boxes labeled with faded markers, Christmas 2005, school papers, memorabilia. Her fingers shook slightly as she pulled out folders, flipping through papers that seemed ordinary at first glance. Old report cards, recital programs, birthday invitations. But then she noticed small inconsistencies. Names spelled differently, dates misaligned, certificates with signatures she didn't recognize. A folded letter fell from the edge of a folder, landing at her feet. She picked it up, her breath catching as she read the handwriting. It was addressed to her father, not in her mother's familiar script, but in a hand that was elegant, precise, and utterly foreign. The letter spoke in vague, almost coded terms. "Ensure she grows as intended. The project cannot fail. All memories must remain intact, but allow her to develop independent thought, enough to maintain the illusion of free will. Any interference must be carefully monitored." Elena's heart pounded. Project. She sank to the floor, pressing the letter to her chest. What did this mean? Was it a metaphor, a family joke, or something far more sinister? The rational part of her brain screamed that she was reading too much into it, but the logical arguments felt flimsy, compared to the raw, undeniable fear curling in her chest. Her hands trembled as she opened the next folder. Inside were photographs. Her as a child, smiling at birthdays, school events, holidays. But something was wrong. Some faces in the photos didn't belong. Adults she didn't recognize hovered in the background. Shadows of other children seemed to overlap with her own image in impossible ways. It was as if reality had been carefully edited, each memory meticulously staged. She sank back against the wooden wall of the attic, eyes wide. Everything she had believed about her life, her childhood, her parents, even herself, was suddenly suspect. What if Vivian hadn't been lying at all? What if she had simply spoken a truth Elena had never dared to face? Elena's thoughts spiraled. Could her parents have been complicit? Were they protecting her, or themselves? She couldn't tell. She knew one thing. The familiar warmth of home, the certainty of family, had dissolved into suspicion and unease. Determined to push further, she began opening every box, every envelope, every folder she could find. She discovered old hospital records with strange annotations, school transcripts with missing months, and letters hinting at adoption or guardianship arrangements she had never been told about. Each piece of evidence seemed to create more questions than answers. A particular folder caught her eye. Before 2008. Inside were photographs of a child she didn't recognize, yet the resemblance was uncanny. The same hair, the same eyes, the same faint dimple on her chin. She stared at the image, mind racing. Was this another sibling? Or was it her? Her pulse quickened. The child in the photograph looked eerily like her, but the date of the photo suggested she was older than Elena had ever been at that time. The realization hit her with chilling clarity. Her own life might have been altered, manipulated, or replaced. Shaking, she pressed her fingers to her temples. Could it be true? Could she be a carefully constructed version of someone else? Every memory, every detail of her life now felt suspect, fragile, like a mirage slowly fading in the sunlight. Hours passed as Elena combed through the attic, piecing together fragments of a story that didn't fully make sense. Letters spoke in cryptic terms about development, observation, and intervention. Photographs showed overlapping timelines that shouldn't have existed. Each discovery pushed her further into obsession, a relentless pursuit of a truth that seemed just beyond her grasp. By the time she descended the stairs, the house was dark and silent. Her parents were asleep, unaware, or perhaps deliberately ignoring, the storm that had begun to churn in their daughter's mind. Elena sat in the kitchen, clutching a small stack of letters and photographs, and realized something terrifying. She could not trust anyone, not even herself. The whispers of doubt, planted first by Vivian and now nurtured by her own discoveries, had taken root. The world she had believed to be real, her childhood, her family, her identity, was crumbling. And Elena knew that the deeper she dug, the more dangerous the truth would become. She couldn't stop now. Because buried within the fragments of her past was a secret that might explain everything. Who she really was, why Vivian had appeared, and what her family had tried to hide for all these years. And if she wasn't careful, discovering it could destroy her entirely. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, the letters and photographs from the attic spread out on her desk like a chaotic constellation of clues. Each one seemed to whisper secrets she wasn't yet ready to hear, yet she couldn't turn away. By morning, determination replaced exhaustion. She knew she couldn't figure this out alone. But who could she trust? Her parents had shown that they were either too afraid or too complicit to tell her the truth. And Max, while loyal, had no way of understanding the depth of her discoveries. That left only one possibility. Someone from the past, someone who had been connected to the family before Vivian arrived. Elena spent the day tracking down old family friends and distant relatives. Each conversation began cautiously, probing for small details that might illuminate the truth. Most people deflected her questions, citing privacy or old age as excuses. But one contact, an elderly woman named Mrs. Callahan, who had been a close friend of her mother before Elena's earliest memories, proved more forthcoming. Mrs. Callahan's house smelled of lavender and dust, and the shelves were crowded with books and photographs. She welcomed Elena with a faint smile but a wary glint in her eyes. "I know why you're here," Mrs. Callahan said before Elena could ask a single question. "You've been asking about the past, about your family. I suppose you found the inconsistencies." Elena nodded, clutching her folder of evidence. "Yes, but I need to know the truth. Please." Mrs. Callahan sighed, her hands trembling slightly as she poured tea. "The truth is complicated. Your parents have always tried to protect you, in the way they thought best. But yes, there are things you were never told." Elena's heart raced. "Like what? What have I been kept from knowing?" Mrs. Callahan hesitated, then spoke slowly, deliberately. "You were carefully placed, Elena. Not born into this family in the ordinary way. Your parents adopted you under unusual circumstances they believed would remain hidden. There were experiments, observations, plans. They never meant for you to discover them." Elena felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "Experiments?" she whispered. "What kind of experiments?" Mrs. Callahan shook her head. "I cannot tell you everything. Not yet. But someone years ago made a choice for your life. And now, with Vivian, that choice has consequences you cannot yet fully understand." Elena's mind spun. All the notes, the letters, the photographs, it wasn't coincidence. Vivian's presence, her uncanny perfection, her manipulations, they were connected to a purpose Elena had never imagined. Her entire life, the memories she had clung to, might have been orchestrated. Who was behind it? Elena demanded, desperation creeping into her voice. Who planned this? Mrs. Callahan's eyes were distant, filled with both sorrow and fear. "There are things even your parents did not fully comprehend. It began with intentions they thought were noble, but the reality is far more complicated. You are special, Elena, in ways they could not protect you from. And now Vivian is part of it." Elena's chest tightened. The words confirmed her growing suspicions. Vivian had not arrived randomly. She had been placed there, deliberately, as if to provoke, to test, or to awaken something that had always been latent in Elena's life. "Why me?" Elena whispered, more to herself than to Mrs. Callahan. "Why was I chosen? And what am I, really?" Mrs. Callahan reached across the table and touched Elena's hand lightly. "You are real, Elena. More real than you can imagine. But reality is complicated. Sometimes, the people we trust most cannot tell us the things we need to know. You will find the answers, but you must be careful. The deeper you dig, the more danger you invite." Elena nodded, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. She had waited long enough. The fragments of her life, the letters, the photographs, the inconsistencies, were no longer mysteries to ponder passively. They were clues she had to assemble, threads that would reveal a tapestry of truth. Returning home, Elena felt a strange clarity. Her parents were unaware of her journey, but she no longer needed them to validate her suspicions. The attic, Mrs. Callahan's revelations, and her own observations were enough to set her path. She needed to confront the gaps, the shadows, the secrets that had been buried for so long. And above all, she needed to understand her connection to Vivian. Why had Vivian arrived at this exact moment in her life? Was it simply coincidence, or was it a deliberate act meant to challenge everything Elena believed about herself? That night, Elena sat in her room with the attic box open before her. She spread the letters and photographs across the floor, studying them like a puzzle. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. A picture of a family that had hidden more than it had revealed, a history of careful manipulations, and a presence in her life that had always been watching, waiting. Vivian's words echoed again, haunting and precise. "You're not as real as you think." But now, Elena understood them differently. They weren't just meant to unnerve her. They were a warning, a challenge. A signal that the real journey was only beginning. Somewhere deep in the shadows of her mind, a single thought crystallized. If her life had been orchestrated, if her memories and identity were fragile constructs, then she had to reclaim them herself. No one else could do it for her. And she would. Because Elena had begun to see the cracks. And within those cracks, she would find the truth. No matter how dangerous or painful it might be. The house was unnervingly silent when Elena returned from Mrs. Callahan's. Her parents were asleep, the clock ticking in the darkened hallway echoing like a metronome counting down to an inevitable confrontation. For the first time, Elena felt that the real danger wasn't just discovering the truth. It was being discovered herself. Vivian's shadow lingered in her mind. Every word she had whispered, every carefully crafted smile, had left an imprint of control, of foresight, that Elena couldn't shake. If Vivian had orchestrated part of her family's perception, then what else had she manipulated? And was she watching now, silently, waiting for Elena to make a mistake? Elena's determination hardened into resolve. She began systematically reviewing the letters, photographs, and documents she had collected. The inconsistencies that once seemed subtle now formed patterns. Timelines that didn't add up, names that overlapped, gaps where crucial events should have occurred. With each revelation, the web of deception grew, revealing a meticulously designed labyrinth in which her life had been carefully staged. The first sign of external threat came the following day. As she returned from school, a black sedan parked near the corner of her street caught her eye. Its windows were darkly tinted, preventing her from seeing inside, but the car remained stationary for several minutes, engine idling softly. Elena's pulse quickened. "Why is it here?" she muttered, heart pounding. She ducked behind a hedge, trying to keep her movements unnoticed. A cold realization settled over her. Someone was watching. Someone knew she was digging deeper. That evening, she decided to confront her fears head-on. She returned to the attic, determined to organize her findings and make sense of them. As she sifted through letters and photographs, she found one she hadn't noticed before. Its paper was thin, yellowed with age, and the handwriting, though familiar, carried a weight that made her shiver. The subject must not discover the truth too soon. Observation must continue. Interference should be subtle, barely perceptible. The integrity of the experiment depends on it. Elena's hands trembled. The words confirmed her worst fears. Her life had been monitored, manipulated, and controlled. And Vivian's arrival was not random. She had been sent with a purpose, to provoke, to test, or to accelerate the revelation of truths Elena wasn't ready to face. The next few days became a tense game of observation. Elena noticed subtle signs of intrusion. Books moved slightly from their usual positions, small items missing and reappearing, faint footprints in the dust. Someone was watching her movements. Someone wanted her to know she was being observed. One night, while reviewing a series of photographs, She noticed a figure in the background of an old birthday photo. Partially obscured, only their outline visible, yet the stance was unmistakable. The resemblance to Vivian was undeniable. It was as if Vivian, or someone like her, had been connected to Elena's life long before she had walked into their home. Elena's mind raced. The lines between past and present blurred. Who had orchestrated this? Was it her parents, a distant relative, or some organization she couldn't yet comprehend? And most importantly, what part of herself had been real, and what part had been designed? Determined to act, she returned to Mrs. Callahan, hoping the elderly woman could provide clarity. This time, however, she was met with caution bordering on fear. "You've stirred things that should have remained dormant," Mrs. Callahan warned, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You're being watched more closely than ever. You must tread carefully. The deeper you go, the more dangerous it becomes." Elena nodded, understanding the gravity of the warning. But fear had been replaced by resolve. The answers were within reach, and she would not allow herself to be intimidated. In the following days, she began piecing together the fragments of her life. Cross-referencing birth records with photographs, analyzing letters for hidden patterns, tracing the faintest trails of manipulation that led her to question every interaction, every memory, every person she thought she could trust. And then one evening, a new clue arrived. A note slipped under her door, written in a hand she immediately recognized. "You're closer than you think. But be careful. Not all truths are meant to be uncovered." Elena held the note in her trembling hands, a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through her. The game had escalated. She wasn't just discovering her past. She was being drawn into a confrontation with forces she didn't yet fully understand. She realized that this was no longer just about Vivian or even her family. It was about control, identity, and survival. Whoever had designed this life, whoever had placed Vivian in her path, had underestimated her. Elena was no longer just a subject. She was a seeker. And she would find the truth, no matter the cost. The night was thick with silence, the kind of oppressive stillness that made every sound, the rustling of leaves outside, the distant hum of the street lamp, feel amplified. Elena sat in her room, letters and photographs sprawled across the floor like a fragmented map of her life. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from anticipation. After weeks of investigation, endless cross-referencing, and tireless sleuthing, she had finally located a file she had overlooked in her parents' study. A file that promised answers she wasn't sure she wanted. Her parents were asleep, oblivious to the storm she had stirred. Elena opened the file with deliberate care. Inside were records that made her heart pound: birth certificates, hospital logs, letters, and documents coded with terms like subject development, experimental observation, and assigned guardian. One letter in particular bore her name and a date, her actual birth date, but the contents were chilling. The subject is to be raised under the supervision of the designated family. All interactions to be monitored. Identity, memories, and personality traits must be carefully guided to maintain stability. Intervention permitted only under protocol. Elena's breath caught. Every memory she had ever held, her parents' warmth, her childhood milestones, her sense of self, was now tinged with doubt. She was not just a child raised by her parents. She was a carefully crafted subject of someone else's design. A knock at the door made her jump. Her father's voice, soft and hesitant, called, "Elena? Are you still awake?" Elena hesitated, then decided there was no turning back. "Yes, Dad. We need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. He entered the room, his expression torn between concern and guilt. "Elena, what's going on? You've been acting different." Elena held up the file. "I know everything. The experiments. The observations. The way my life was orchestrated. Why didn't you tell me?" Her mother appeared behind him, eyes wide, hands trembling. "Elena, it was supposed to be a protection, not a deception. We wanted you safe. We thought, if you never knew, you'd live a normal life. Safe." Elena's voice cracked. "You call manipulating my entire life, controlling my memories, and monitoring me safe?" Her eyes filled with tears, but her resolve did not waver. "And Vivian? She was part of this, wasn't she? She was sent to test me, to see if I would notice." Her father swallowed hard. "Vivian? Yes. She was. She was meant to provoke certain responses. To see if the subject— he paused, glancing at her mother. You could withstand external influence. It was a test. Elena felt the weight of their words like a physical blow. Every subtle manipulation, every uncanny smile, every unnerving observation by Vivian now made sense. It had never been about family dynamics. It had been about control, assessment, and verification of her identity. "And what about me?" Elena whispered, voice trembling with both fear and determination. "Am I real? Or just a construct?" Her mother knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. "Elena, you are real. You are as real as any person can be. But the life you have lived, the choices you thought were yours, they were carefully guided. We had to follow instructions from people who claimed to know better." Elena's mind reeled. The lines between reality and manipulation blurred entirely. She had grown up believing in herself, in her memories, in her family. Yet every certainty she held was now a question. "You've been lied to, yes," her father said quietly. "But the truth is, we never wanted to hurt you. We wanted to protect you from a world that might have been cruel, experimental, unrelenting." Elena's anger flared. "Protect me? By pretending my life was mine? By sending someone to manipulate me and test me? Do you have any idea what this feels like?" Her parents could only look down, unable to meet her gaze. Elena turned back to the file, scanning every document with renewed fury and purpose. Every note, every record, every subtle manipulation was now a clue to reclaiming her autonomy. She realized that knowing the truth was only the beginning. The final revelation came in the form of an old, handwritten note hidden at the bottom of the file. The handwriting was faint, almost childlike, but unmistakable. It read, "The subject may be influenced, but she is resilient. She will surpass expectations. Let her live, let her choose, and she will define herself beyond design." Elena's heart raced. She was not just a passive subject. Despite the manipulation, despite the orchestrated events, she had grown, learned, and adapted. Vivian's arrival, her family's secrecy, the careful orchestration, all of it had led to this: the opportunity to reclaim her life, her identity, and her reality. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were not tears of fear, they were tears of clarity and resolve. Elena realized that her reality, though manipulated, was still hers to define. She could no longer be a passive participant in the design of others. She would reclaim her identity, confront the shadows of her past, and decide who she wanted to be. And in that moment, Elena made a silent promise. She would find Vivian again. She would understand why she had been sent, why she had disrupted her life, and she would ensure that no one, not even those who orchestrated her existence, would control her future again. The truth had been revealed. Now the real battle for autonomy, for identity, and for reality itself would begin. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, mirroring the storm inside Elena as she stepped cautiously along the quiet street. She had tracked Vivian's movements through careful observation, the trail finally leading to an abandoned house at the edge of town. It was a structure long forgotten by the world, its windows dark and its doors hanging slightly ajar, yet Elena knew without a doubt that this was where it would end, where she would face the orchestrator of her doubts, fears, and manipulated life. Her hands clenched the stack of documents she had gathered, letters, photographs, and records that detailed not only her origin but Vivian's purpose in her life. Every step toward the house felt like a step deeper into a revelation that could change everything. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Elena's footsteps echoed against the wooden floors as she moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the shadows. And then she saw her, Vivian, standing in the center of the room, perfectly poised, as if she had been expecting Elena all along. "Finally," Vivian said, voice smooth, almost melodic. "I wondered how long it would take for you to come." Elena's chest tightened. "Why? Why did you do all of this?" "My parents, the tests, the manipulations. Why me?" Vivian tilted her head, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "Why you? You are remarkable. Elena." The subject, the experiment, it was never about causing harm. It was about potential, about seeing who could rise above the design. "I wasn't here to destroy you. I was here to challenge you." Elena's hands shook, but her voice was steady. "Challenge me? You called yourself a sister, a friend, a part of my life. And it was all a lie. You manipulated everything I knew. Everything I believed. Vivian's smirk faded into seriousness. I did what was necessary. But I never intended to define you. That, Elena, was always your choice. I merely provided the test. The question you must answer is, who are you when all the lies are stripped away? Elena felt a surge of clarity. The fear, the anger, the doubt. All of it had been external forces trying to control her reality. But Vivian's purpose, twisted as it seemed, was a mirror reflecting Elena's own potential. I am real, Elena said firmly, her voice echoing in the empty room. Not because of what others tell me or manipulate me to be, but because I choose to be. Every memory, every feeling, every decision. I claim them as mine. You don't control me anymore. Vivian studied her silently, and for the first time, Elena saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes. Bold, she said finally. Perhaps you truly are. Resilient. Perhaps I underestimated the subject. Elena took a step closer. This ends now, Vivian. Your games, your manipulations, they're over. I will define my own life, my own reality, and I will not be controlled. Vivian's lips curved into a small, almost approving smile. Then perhaps the test is complete. She stepped back into the shadows, her figure blending into the darkness. Remember, Elena, the world will always try to shape you. But you have chosen to be yourself. And just like that, Vivian was gone, leaving Elena alone in the abandoned house, surrounded by echoes of past manipulations and the lingering weight of revelations. But for the first time, Elena didn't feel trapped or uncertain. She felt powerful. She had faced the architect of her doubts, confronted the shadow that had loomed over her identity, and emerged with her autonomy intact. Returning home, Elena walked through the familiar rooms with new eyes. Every object, every memory, every moment was hers. Not a fabrication, not a manipulation. She didn't need Vivian's tests or anyone else's designs to define her reality. She would write her own story, reclaim her past on her own terms, and shape her future with clarity and purpose. Her parents watched her from the doorway, a mix of relief and awe on their faces. Elena, you've changed, her mother whispered. Elena smiled, a soft, steady smile. I know who I am now. And I will never let anyone else decide that for me again. That night, as she lay in bed, Elena felt a profound sense of peace. The storm of deception and manipulation had passed. The shadows had been faced, the mysteries unraveled, and the whispers of doubt silenced. Vivian had tested her, challenged her, and disrupted her life. But in the end, Elena had reclaimed herself. She was real, not because someone told her she was, but because she chose to be. And in that choice she found freedom. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more original novel stories. And stay tuned, our next story is coming soon.